Good evening, and welcome back to the Not So Perfect Bigfoot Show. Tonight, I am so excited about my guest. I've been trying to get him on since June, and he is so busy. I love his story, and honestly, if you guys have not, go to Spotify. We'll get into where you can find him at and just listen to some of his podcasts. He's a very well-spoken gentleman. He served our country, and he's going to tell you about his journey. Then we're going to jump into the 33rd parallel. Brad, go ahead and tell him as much as you want or as little as you want.
How you guys doing? My name is Bradley Lail, or just Brad. I'm the host of the Awaken podcast and a veteran, 8-year veteran in the Air Force, served overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan. Just kind of, I was born and raised in South Carolina in the National Forest. So growing up, we had the, thank you, Gary. Appreciate that. Growing up, a lot of crazy things. You hear a lot of stories we have this tale of the ghost light in the national forest and all these other different things that you hear about as a kid, but you just kind of store it in the back of your mind. And it's not till you get older. So that's at least the case for me, was that I didn't realize so many people that I knew and loved, all family members and friends and cousins and you name it, have had encounters with different things, from puckwudgies to, potential Bigfoots or cloaked Bigfoots to UFOs to crazy looking creatures crawling across the road, just all kinds of different things. So it wasn't until I got older that I realized, like, there's a parallel that connects where I'm from with Roswell and all kind of different sites across the U.S. It's highly paranormal stuff like Bermuda Triangle and Phoenix, Arizona, which is famous for the Phoenix Lights. So there's a lot of weird connections there. And as I got older and I got into, you get into conspiracy first, and then you get into paranormal, and then usually paranormal leads to spirituality. Everything always comes back to God, and so my path started with conspiracy. I started noticing stuff as a marketer. After I got out of the Air Force, I went and got my degree in marketing, and I started started noticing all this weird, shadow banning and stuff back in early as 2008, 2009, 2010. Just weird commercials, like hidden messages in commercials and stuff. And for about 12 years, I kind of noticed all this stuff, and I kept quiet, but I would also email people and I would just say, hey, I've noticed this. You guys should pay attention to it too. And nobody was really paying me any attention until I got to go on Tony Merkel's show in the confessionals and Tinfoil Hat. And I was able to really, break out, I guess, on those two really huge shows and tell my story and tell my, kind of tell the story of what I see and the connections I've made on along the 33rd parallel. So again, it's a very interesting, how I came about it. I can't really explain it other than I feel like God has put me in positions all throughout my life, including my time in the military, to kind of see things and experience things. That way I can talk about these things modern day. Here I am today talking about a lot of the stuff that I experienced. I've been to countries such as like Turkmenistan, places that most people would never in a million years go. I got to actually go to these places, and then when you go over there, you see all these old world buildings and stuff that just don't make a lot of sense. And so again, all these things kind of foreshadowed, I guess you could say, my future or what I was doing. I wasn't very awakened then, but again, as I got older, and I guess that's part of getting older too, is just you kind of have this spiritual awakening, and kind of started to see what was really going on in the world and all the lies we've been told and all the fake history we've been told. And so it kind of got me down this path of like, I'm ready to speak out about a lot of stuff. I'm ready to see a lot, go explore a lot more places and help shed some light on some of this hidden history that we have right here in our own backyard, including South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana. You can go on down the line and of the 33rd parallel, and there's just all kind of hidden gems and hidden megalithic structures in the woods that you've never heard of and I've never heard of. And I'm 41 years old, and I've never heard any of these stories in the history books. But you go to places like Georgia and you see these big old rock eagle effigies and all these pyramids, you know, in Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana. And again, we've never heard of them. And so that's the interesting thing to me, is how come we don't know our history that's in our own backyard? So my goal now is to kind of help educate people on what's going on in our own backyard. You know, Graham Hancock's got a great documentary on Netflix now called Ancient America or something like that. I can't remember what it was exactly. And he just kind of touches the surface of it. He doesn't even know what's hidden in the national forests right here in our own backyard. So, you know, that's kind of my goal, is my future goal is to kind of get out there and explore and start beating the bush and filming some of this stuff and kind of showing everybody what, you know, what's really going on. So.
Well, a lot of people wouldn't think it, but you're also a Bigfoot person too. You've explored that area of it too, because it all seems to go together.
Yeah, you know, and I know it's a Bigfoot community. I know a lot of people. I would assume there's a divide sometimes between, you know, is Bigfoot a real, you know, entity that, or you know, creature, cryptid that lives in the woods. But I have a different take on it. I think they're interdimensional. They're coming from, you know, through portals and different things, and they start off as plasma balls, and then they come into our reality. And they're kind of like shapeshifters. So I kind of look at them in a different light. Right in my mom and dad's backyard, you know, my grandma, who used to live there before, she's had encounters with, you know, Bigfoot. What she said, in her own words, was she talks to Bigfoot all the time, like communicate. You know, she used to communicate with him. She's passed away since, and my mom and dad moved in the house, and in the same exact spot that my grandma said that she communicated with Bigfoot, my niece has seen, you know, orbs. My mom has seen like a cloaked Bigfoot. She's also seen a UFO. She called me in the middle of the night a few months back at 1:30 in the morning, and she's like, "What is this?" And it was literally just a UFO hovering right over that spot.
Oh.
She's seen hundreds of orbs in one spot right around the same time she saw the cloaked Bigfoot. My dad, just before he passed away, he had an encounter, I guess you could say, with his tree stand in the same spot that something was like knocking all over the tree stand, and you know, he was look out and there's nothing out there and that kind of stuff. So he had this feeling that it was something like that, you know. So again, a lot of crazy things at my family's house and on their land, all in the same spot, all weird, unmarked helicopters and planes always hovering over, you know, my mom and dad's property. Always there's a UFO. There's a UFO video online about that I found, that I discovered whenever I kind of started getting down this path, which I found out that the government, like, people will call and make UFO reports to the FAA, and the FAA will tell people to go report it on the National UFO Reporting Center, which is, it's National UFO Reporting Center.org. I don't know the acronym for it right offhand, but basically you can go to this website, and it's not a government organization. It's one guy who runs a website, and basically people just post their stories on there. And so you could sit there and read through these stories for days and hours. And I found my little area where I'm from, and I sat there and read all these interesting stories. And one thing I came across was a video of a UFO in my hometown, and I found that interesting. I clicked on it, and I was like, "Oh, this is pretty cool." So I called my dad up. This was before he passed away, and I said, "Hey, man, have you ever heard of this guy who posted this video?" And he goes, "Yeah, man, he lives right at the head of our dirt road," because I grew up on a dirt road. And I said, "Really? So where's this at?" And he goes, "Oh, that's right here." Like, right where? He's like, "Oh, over our house." I was like, so it's like a mothership looking UFO with little orbs shooting out of it. And the reason I say that stuff is because these orbs, most people who encounter these entities, these Bigfoots, these big feet, whatever the plural is for that, say that they come, they start off as a plasma ball, and then they kind of morph into, usually like a Bigfoot type or an alien type, or they morph into different things. So I started kind of looking into that, and I got this theory on plasma portals, which is a very interesting theory where basically plasma is the fourth state of matter, and there's putrefied ions. Like when animals die, their ions, their body putrefies, and the ions kind of disperse into the environment that it's in. Like they'll just kind of hang around in the atmosphere. And
is it like an energy?
ma'am?
Is it like an energy?
Yeah. So plasma is it's particles that are constantly looking to form again. So it's like lightning or the aurora borealis. It's always constantly looking for something to form on. Like if you touch a plasma ball and you put your finger to it, you see that little tendril of purple lightning that touches your finger. That's because those ions are looking to form something again. And so my theory on it is that these things are vibrating in to our dense matter from another reality, and they're using the ions available, and that's why they morph. That's why these things look, like hey David, how you doing? That's why these things look different all the time, and that's why they smell bad, and that's why they have humanistic features as well as animal features. So that's why a Yeti, for example, is a white Bigfoot, because he uses the putrefied ions of animals that have died in the snow, right? So again, my theory on it is kind of different from the bipedal creature that walks through the woods. It feels like they have a mission here on Earth, almost like they're here to fix something or repair something. Every time you see these things, they're kind of on a mission. They're every time you see aliens, or every time you see Bigfoots or UFOs, it's not like they're just like going and visiting Walmart or whatever. They're actually like, these things are shooting out. They're kind of flying through the national forest as if they're fixing something or repairing something, or possibly looking for some kind of scientific evidence or something. They're doing something, is my point. And my theory on that is that they are actually repairing a energy grid that was destroyed. And I think that these things travel. They use the energy grid of the Earth as a motive to draw motive power to basically travel around like a subway system on Earth. And I think that our government keeps blowing this grid up so they can't repair it, because the guy who recorded the UFOs at my mom and dad's house, again, we live on the 33rd parallel right in the middle of the national forest. Every time the UFOs would show up, and he would record them in the same spot over my mom and dad's house just about every night, the local jets from Charleston Air Force Base would fly out there and chase them off. So pretty interesting, my little take on it, my little 2 cents on it. I mean, I know there's people like you guys who study it and hear stories all the time of different types of things. So that's just kind of my take on it, is that they exist in some form of, like, they're doing something, like they're gathering. Ma'am?
Like they have a purpose?
Yeah, they have a purpose here. Like they're doing something. I don't think they necessarily live here. I think that they come in and out of our reality to do something, whatever that may be. So again, I know that's a little bit different of a take on it that most people have. So,
well, actually, I enjoy that theory on it, because we look at different aspects of it, and we always keep our mind open. We're not just a flesh and blood show. We do have people that just believe that. We do have people in the community that's in the comments that has experienced cloaking and such. So we keep our minds open, and we believe in communication. But when you're looking at something that's on the 33rd parallel and you're having this own activity, when you say it out loud, you're like, wow, I can't even believe I'm talking about this and saying this out loud. But you get the same stories over and over with, the strangeness, the orbs, the UFOs, I know someone actually from Georgia that watched an orb come up and it had a face in it, and it was in
Yep.
a area with a lot of high activity. And I think what you said about the odor and the ions, I have never heard that theory before, and I think that is a very incredible and very interesting theory.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's original to me, but I have heard bits and pieces about plasma, theories on plasma and stuff from other people. But yeah, I've never heard anybody talk about plasma portals the way, in the sense that there's a government document, and if I can find it, I'll read it for you. I do it all the time. I always try to bring it up on these shows because I think it's important. And it's a document from the FBI Black Vault, which is let me find it real quick. From 1947. This was the day after Roswell, and there was an FBI agent in California, and he wrote an article to the local paper, kind of talking, because it was a big event when the Roswell crash happened. It was a national event, and the newspapers picked up on it quickly. So they reached out to a local FBI agent, and the FBI agent kind of wrote up a little article for them, kind of trying to explain what these things are. And if I can read it, if I can bring it up, I'll read it. It says, this is, and you can find this online, and this is the round robin. That's the flying roll, or the round robin is the name of the newspaper that this was published in, and it was published out of San Diego, California, July 8th, 1947. And this guy is again explaining what he thinks these things are. Okay, and it says, part of the discs carry crews. Others are under remote control. Their mission is peaceful. The visitors contemplate settling on this plane. The visitors are human-like, but much larger in size. They are not excarnate Earth people, but come from their own world. They do not come from any planet, as we use this word, but from an etheric planet which interpenetrates within our own and is not perceptible to us. The bodies of these visitors and the craft also automatically materialize on entering the vibratory rate of our dense matter. Okay, so that's the point I want to make, was that they know how to change their frequencies and come into our reality and exit our reality. That's why when people try to record UFOs with their phone, they just look like they're blipping and quickly moving and different things like that. It's because they are just popping in and out whenever they want. They can change their vibrations anytime they want. And so UFOs, for example, when they vibrate into our reality, they are using ions from the basically closer to the ionosphere every time they're in the sky. And so there's different metals and things that they use. And so the stuff that they're using is available in these higher altitudes, of the of the different ionosphere, the different levels of the atmosphere. So that's why they look like these metal things that shine in the sky. They're just pulling from ions up there. Meanwhile, in the swamps, again, they're pulling from ions of stinky animals that look like deer and look like skunks and look like all these other different things, right? So but again, I wanted to bring that up because I think that's an interesting point, that our government's already talking about this, and they're not calling them extraterrestrials. They're calling them ultraterrestrials. They don't come from, ma'am?
Could you explain the difference? I'm kind of like a 3-year-old here.
Well, extra means from somewhere else, another place, another planet perhaps. Ultra kind of means like within, and that's what that document was saying as well. It's like or maybe not within, maybe just and it says it in the document too, not perceptible to us. If we are in God's light, if you look at the visible light of this electromagnetic spectrum, we are in the visible light of the electromagnetic spectrum. We're just this tiny little blip on a very large rainbow scale of frequency. And there's things that aren't perceptible to us because we can only see what's in the visible light. We can only see what's materialized in this frequency. And so there are frequencies that are outside of our perception that these things live. And I will say it because I think that's the topic that everybody's talking about is they're Nephilim. They're fallen angels. They're trying to get into this world, and they're trying to create hybrids to populate this world and get rid of the population of this earth, of our reality. But unfortunately, we were made in God's, unfortunately for them, we were made in God's light, made in his image. We are the only ones who can create. The only things that they keep creating are these drones, essentially, these mindless NPCs, if you will, without souls, different things like that. We're the only ones with souls. So that's sort of, again, my take on all of this is like these things reside in a world that's low frequency and high frequency that vibrates at a fast, too fast for to be in our perfect temperature, our perfect zone, our perfect frequency. And then they vibrate too slow, which means they're too cold. So if you wanted to look at it, hell could be both hot and cold. Yeah. So I'm sorry if I'm a little bit all over.
No, actually, it's a topic that I don't want you to hold back on. I've heard, not to go back to my near-death experience, but when I was talking about that, I was in a cold, damp basement. And, and I always wondered, well, if I was on the verge of going to hell because I didn't, have my life right, why was it cold? But hell would be a lower frequency. And so it would be colder.
That's right. And when you had your near death experience, was it warm and loving and perfect?
It started out
when did these? Okay, so you started to experience.
It started out that way, but it didn't finish that way, buddy. I was like, I got to get my stuff together. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You gotta get right with the Lord. That's what it was.
Okay, so you're going into frequencies, ions, and everything like that. What's your opinion on mind speak, on people that hear them talk to them in their head? Have you ever looked into that, or do you have opinions on that?
Well, I mean, I think that we all have that ability. I think that ability to. Have you ever been thinking about somebody and they call, or they die the next day, or whatever the case is?
Yeah.
I think we have that ability to sense or know or communicate with each other. I got this overwhelming feeling one day that my mom was just in a bad headspace or something, and I called her and she was. So I feel like we are constantly sending signals and communicating with each other. Right before my cousin died, I was cutting grass and I hadn't seen him for like 20 years. And I was cutting grass. I was out on the riding lawnmower riding around, and I just had this thought come into my head about him. And it was just a blip, just like, oh, I wonder what Sean's up to. And then my dad called me the next day and found out that Sean had actually died. So it was an interesting, like, again, I think that's there, but I think that there are frequencies that are constantly being pushed out that, thank you, Diane. They're constantly being pushed out, that's scrambling. I have this tri-field meter that's in my office, in my closet in my office in here. And if you could see my office right now, I got a giant computer screen in front of me. I got a giant camera right here. I got a light over here. I got a ceiling fan overhead. I got a electromagnetic floating baseball card display over here. And so I got all this frequency just constantly bombarding my brain. And, I think that was one thing about, and not to get political or anything like that, I'm not a very political person, but like 2020 kind of woke up a lot of people because people started going outside again more, and their antennas were tuned in back into God and nature, and they started to wake up and see that we're being, something is being done to us, and we've all kind of slowly started to wake up. So, excuse me. I ate dinner right before I came. I probably should.
You're fine. We're laid back. We're not formal at all. As a matter of fact, we got called up. What was it? A hillbilly / redneck show the other day, and they just loved it.
Where are you from, by the way? Tennessee area?
I am from North Carolina.
No, I was gonna say North Carolina.
I am your neighbor, sir. No, you're actually not in South Carolina anymore,
Yeah,
but
I
okay.
am in South Carolina.
Oh yeah, I'm your neighbor, sir.
Yeah, I could tell. It's usually either North Carolina or Tennessee, so you must be close to the mountains somewhere, or on the west side of North Carolina. No?
Well, you're from South Carolina, so you've heard of Robeson County.
Yes, yeah. You
Try
don't
not
have to tell you where you don't have to tell on air where you're from or anything. I'm
No,
just kind
I'm
of
from
guessing.
Robeson
You
County.
could just say you could say
I
region.
don't hide. No, sir, I don't hide anything. I am Robeson County, cornbread fed all day long. I was in Philadelphia and started talking one time, and someone said, "Are you from Robeson County?"
I got most of my family is from like Hickory. So like every time I go, I've been places. I was stationed in Turkey, and the guy came up to me and he saw my last name and he goes, "Hey, you from Hickory?" And I said, "No, but I get that a lot." Thank you, Selena. I appreciate that. No, I'm much stupider than you actually think. Believe me.
Well, they seem
um,
to be enjoying the topic. So I agree with you. I think the more we got our phones to our faces. And I think they call it
yeah.
the blue light. The blue light or the blue screen is actually like it actually went into the light bulbs. The bright white light bulbs aren't even, they tell us to get that will save us money. I read where those are the worst things you can have in your house. You need to go back to the old school golden ones that, and but it's something about a blue energy, or I don't know. I'm not the brightest crayon in the box, but I do catch a little bit of it. Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, we are at our very core, the atoms that make up matter, we vibrate. We have this every at the core of atoms there's quarks, and these quarks rub together and they vibrate. And when they vibrate, they create a frequency. And so all of this matter, that's why it's called matter, is because it's material. So the more these atoms vibrate together, they form stuff. So everything has a frequency. This desk in front of me has a frequency, and we have a frequency, and we have an aura, and our heart is the center of our aura, and it creates a torus field around us, right? And that torus field, like I said, generates an aura or that energy field. So we're energetic beings. Why do you think they wanting to keep us 6 feet apart, right?
Yeah,
Because
makes
if
sense.
love connect, if we can get our energy fields together, and love will connect us. If you notice, the thing that keeps us apart, the thing they try to keep us apart is love all the time. Think about the people who have tried to um, talk about love. Bob Marley and Martin Luther King Jr. and John F. Kennedy, and all these people who, John Lennon. What happened to all of them?
Gone.
There's a common thread to people who continue to talk about love. And so, this is, the devil runs this world. And so and a lot of people forget that it says that in the Bible, that this is basically he's in charge here. And so we have to guard our energy. There's things out there that they're disembodied entities that are trying to attach themselves to us. So they're going to try to slow our frequencies down in whatever way they can through fear, because fear is a very low frequency. It's a 4 hertz frequency. 528 is a love frequency. So if you're vibrating high, you're vibrating in the frequency of love. And if you're vibrating low, again, spirits, that's why they call alcohol spirits. If you drink alcohol, things like that, it keeps your vibrations low. You're opening the door for spirits to attach themselves to you. Because again, if we're vibrating at a normal temperature here, and then we slow our vibrations down, then these disembodied entities in the unseen, unperceivable world around us can attach themselves to us. So excuse me. I think the whole point of what I was trying to say with the aura, the energy field around us, the electromagnetic field that we create around us, if you take that tri-field meter that I have and you hold it in front of this computer screen, it's going to go crazy. And that energy is coming right at my face. If I'm in here too long, my face gets super red, because there's so much electromagnetic energy just coming at my face, coming at me, and it's making my blood boil. And that jams our frequency, right? it jams the brain, the electromagnetic or the electric waves that are flowing through our brain, and it's constantly jamming us. And I think it's all by design. That's why when people go out in nature, I got pine tree. I got a few acres here, and I got pine trees are diamagnetic, which means they absorb frequency. And so I try to get outside as much as I can and get in nature, because the trees will absorb that frequency and block us from it. There's a lot of people. There's a guy named Topher Gardner who goes on a lot of these big shows, and he has a great podcast called Biocharisma. He makes a paint that's a frequency, that's a diamagnetic paint that basically repels frequency. The only thing that sucks about that is that we can't escape the electric stuff that's running through our walls. And these things live and they reside in the unseen world. In the unseen world is where these radio waves exist. You know, that's where radio waves go. That's why we can't see them. When we make a phone call, when we try to film something, when we're doing this right here, it passes through the unseen world, and they can affect it in whatever way they want. I do podcasts all the time where I start talking about this, and all of a sudden cameras shut off and mics shut off and all this stuff, because I'm talking a lot about this kind of stuff, right? So again, I think that we have to guard our energy. We have to keep our energy. It's very special to us. Our energy is very, very powerful. And when you watch the news and you watch politics, like I used to sit there and watch the news every night, and I would drink and I would just be like, oh man, look what them Democrats are doing to us, or whatever the case is, you know, and I would get all worked up. But I realized, thank you, Erica. But what I realized was that's what their game is to get us all scrambled and get our frequencies all crazy.
And get us medicated where our frequencies go down.
Yeah, I don't think that people are actually sick with like viruses and things like that. I think people get sick because they're out of alignment with themselves. Their vibrations are off. And that's where a lot of like, you know, tuning forks and things like that. What are the healing bowls called? The Himalayan healing bowls.
Yeah,
like that.
I was thinking about ordering one. So.
Yeah. You know, that's why bells don't exist anymore. They got rid of all the bells in the United States, right? So, because bells, when they would ring, they create a frequency that kind of aligns us back, that gets us back to a central alignment. And
that makes sense.
Yeah, and like I said, where are all the bells now? They got rid of them in the United States, right? Where are they at? There's like one that we know of. I mean, there's some on churches still, but most of them are like, you know, I think they've got rid of like 500,000 bells in the early 1900s. So,
well, wait. So that makes sense. When I was walking out of my work today and I was going to my car, I mean, I was just like, I had so much I had to do before, you know, 5 p.m. came, and we have a huge church across the street, and the bells go off throughout the days. And as soon as they went going, I just went, come right on down. It's you are right on that. That is incredible.
Yeah, and it's done on purpose. I mean, we forget who we really are. We're special. We're made in God's favor, in His image, and we forget that. And I think part of our job here on earth, I think we're supposed to go through crap, and we're supposed, like, I think it's a school where we're supposed to learn how to love and how to, you know, elevate yourself to the highest version of yourself. When you vibrate at a higher level, you can do anything you want in this world. You can create. It's amazing how things change your life when you change your radio station. You can change your life. You really can. And I used to think, you know, growing up, I would hear my mom and dad always say stuff like, and you grow, you know, you hear the same thing when you grow up poor. Oh, you know, boy, it must be nice to have that, or boy, it must be nice to have this. And when you hear that kind of stuff, you think about it. That's low vibrational stuff, you know.
Bringing yourself down.
Yeah, it's you're telling the universe, you're telling God, like, this is what I want, because you're speaking it into existence. When we speak, our words are vibrations as well, and you can manifest things. That's why prayer is so powerful. But when you pray, you have to pray as if you can feel it. Don't just be like, I wish that I would get better, Lord, thank you, whatever. Just imagine yourself. You have to think it, because your thoughts are vibrations as well.
Is that's what they mean by the faith of a mustard seed? You see it to believe it, and you have to keep that positive energy going. Is that kind of what it would be like?
Yeah, you just think of the thing that you want, and you hyper focus on that, and you feel what it's like. If you're praying for rain, for example, if you're like, boy, Lord, I really wish we could get some crops right now, you're praying for something that doesn't exist. When you think about it and you imagine what the rain feels like, if you can smell the rain, if you can just imagine the crops growing as big as they can grow, that's how you really should pray. You should pray your vibrations, your thoughts are vibrations, and your vibrations can become reality. And I think that's a very important thing for people to understand. That, and listen, I'm not rich, or I don't have a bunch of great stuff or anything, but I have experienced this in my own life. Yeah, it is the power of the tongue. Well, that's why they call it spelling, because you're casting spells with your tongue, which is a wand almost. You're casting spells with your tongue. But there's a lot of this kind of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of word magic, for example, that goes along with this. That's why they do. That's why they write laws. A lot of these Capitol buildings, you really think we built these buildings out of granite, 200, 300 years ago? How? We had horse and buggy. It didn't make any sense. No, they found these things on these, because all these Capitol buildings are on ley lines. And these ley lines, they write their spells, their laws, and there's certain times of day when they have to cast these spells, and that's whenever they vote for these laws and different things like that. So there's power in energy coming from the energies of the earth, and the ley lines are like heavier than normal electromagnetic energies that are coming from the earth. And it's no surprise that a lot of these Hollywood, Atlanta, these are where most of the broadcasting, again, you're casting spells with you're broadcasting spells. And they're doing it on these ley lines because they're trying to amplify that message. And what they normally do when they cast these spells on, broadcast these spells on ley lines, the idea is for them not to be truthful. The idea is for them to say it over and over until we start to think it in our mind and manifest it into a reality. So it doesn't have to be true. They can say all they want about this, that, and the other. It doesn't matter to them if it's true or not. The only thing that matters is that if we start to believe it, if we start to manifest it into reality, when the collective consciousness comes together, it's very powerful. And that's why they shadow ban us from different platforms. That's why they, hide all these things from us, because we are putting out, and that's what we're doing on channels like ours, is we're putting out a dissonant frequency to their resonant frequency. We're shattering their airwaves essentially, and they can't stop it anymore. And it's becoming pretty evident. So
that's awesome. Let me put this out there. Then I have a couple of questions. I know eventually, as we wind it down, they're going to have some questions, but you were willing to stay and take questions. I just sent my husband out for his I can't remember. I get our anniversary and his birthday mixed up. Bad, Vicky. But anyway, I sent him up to Asheville, North Carolina. And I don't know if you ever heard of Dale Hoffman, but they were practicing the frequencies and the meditation. And he went into somewhere where, I mean, a spiritual, I don't want to say realm, but it was all about energy and frequency and toning. And so I'm supposed to go like in December, but I told him once that I watched a video, and I think it was Japan, And they actually had a cancer patient where they laid hands on the cancer patient and they hummed a frequency and they actually healed the tumor. Do
Yep.
you have any thoughts on that?
Well, that's what old churches used to be. They're
Laying
cymatics.
hands.
Yeah. Well, these older churches throughout Europe, there's a lady named Tanya Harris who did a study on cymatics. She basically took speakers and a petri dish of water, and she went inside an empty cathedral, into many different empty cathedrals, and she recorded the sound of nothing. And basically the vibrations, she just recorded vibrations of the building. And what she discovered was that these buildings have a frequency that is like perfect sacred geometry. And so if you think about like what do all these old, and they call them churches now, but I think they used to be like healing centers, like hospitals and things like that. And I think that it probably became more religious centers because it was healing people, right? So like think about organs. Organs are very dung, dung, these different tones, bells, choirs, all this stuff, the connection of people, all these sounds heal people. These frequencies heal people. And again, that's why they stopped us from going to church and things like that on during 2020. That's why they stopped us from going to church and stuff like that, because there's healing powers in singing and communion and all these other different things. So again, the cymatics of things people have overlooked, but everything is fractals in this universe. Everything is, just looking at wood or flour or whatever, you can find the golden ratio in everything. And that's because it's infinite fractals that make up this thing, whatever that thing is. And that's no different from buildings. So I actually think that buildings used to be created with sound. And I think that things used to be lifted with sound. That's where I think the pyramids came from. I think that they used to move these, 160,000 pound blocks with sound and through levitation, because we were more connected to the earth then. We were more in tune with the frequencies of the world, and we could do this kind of stuff. But I think that again, they are blocking us from that for some reason. Don't really know what that reason is, but
are the pyramids on the 33rd parallel?
There are lots of pyramids on the 33rd, but not the Giza pyramids. They're on like the 29th or something like that. But the interesting thing is that allegedly the Earth's axis has moved 3 degrees. So maybe it was aligned closer to the 33rd, what is now the 33rd parallel before. So, but yeah, no, there's not. Most of the time, you'll get a lot of paranormal activity on heavy ley lines. And the reason you get heavy activity, excuse me, is because these ley lines create these telluric currents, which kind of create vortexes. And these vortexes kind of spin up in these different areas, and it's electromagnetic energy. It's electric, right? So, thank you. I promise you, there's nothing to be impressed about. But they spin up and they can kind of wrap themselves around like pyramids. The pyramids used to be wrapped in limestone, which could conduct electricity. So when you look at things through the lens of an energy grid, it puts you in a different frame of reference as to what we used to do on this earth. But going back to the energy vortexes that it creates, where these things come from, where these telluric energies come from, is the center of the earth, and it's electromagnetic energy that comes from the center of the earth, and it flows up through creeks and volcanoes and any kind of fault lines. I'm from the Charleston area, so it's no coincidence that Charleston is one of the biggest faults in North America, right? And there's a lot of heavy paranormal activity on those fault lines. And the same with like Knoxville, Tennessee. It's not a surprise that they got the what is the CERN of Tennessee there. I forgot what it's called. Oak. I can't remember the name of it, but Oak Ridge, maybe. Yeah, it's like
somebody in that one chat. They'll throw it up.
So that there's another fault line so it's not a surprise that there's a lot of dogman activity and Bigfoot activity in the Smoky Mountains. There's a volcano located underneath the Capitol building in Mississippi. There's literally a volcano located underneath. So think about the power of the electromagnetic current that's coming up from that, hitting these granite buildings and projecting a powerful signal, right? So when they write laws in Mississippi, for example, it's going to be a much more powerful law because of the volcano that's literally located right underneath the Bermuda Triangle. The island of Bermuda is a volcanic seamount. So again, anomalous activity coming up from these currents coming up from these volcanoes and kind of flowing across the earth and creating like, this vortex of like energy. Like if you walk through it, it would just kind of fry your brain because it's so much electric activity. My mom called me one night and she said she was on the phone with me, and we live on a road that's got a lot of potholes. And the reason it's got a lot of potholes is because there's a bunch of springs that run underneath it. And she got to this area and she goes, "What the hell?" And she goes, "I just came through this area. What in the world? Why am I passing it again?" It's like she hit a time slip. And then it kind of took her back 2 miles and she passed through the area again. And again, I think that's one of those anomalies of electromagnetic energy that's kind of spinning up in an area. And when she hits it, it just like is, discombobulating or whatever. Because if you think about like hard drives, if you take a magnet to a hard drive, you can scramble the whole hard drive. And if you think about our brains as hard drives, and you go through a highly magnetic or highly electric field of energy, then it could really kind of throw you for a loop. So I think that these ley lines can cause a lot of mental damage to people who live in these areas. My mom gets a lot of migraines, for example. We've had a lot of crazy deaths in my hometown, like unbelievable amount. I lost 4 of my best friends in car accidents and other crazy things. And it's very weird. It's a very weird energy that comes like to say I've lost 1,000 friends, ex-girlfriends, other close family members is an understatement. There might be way more than that. Yeah, and that's coming from a small town. So when people say, "Oh, thank you for serving. Did you lose any friends?" And I'm like, "Yeah, my hometown. Like, I didn't lose a lot of friends in the service. I lost a lot of friends back home." So, but I think part of that is because, in a lot of these heavily anomalous areas with heavy electromagnetic energy, you're going to have people who are opposite sides of the spectrum with it's going to be a lot of highs and a lot of lows. If you can't handle the energy, you'll be on the low side. If you can handle the energy, also out of my small town, we've had 10 NFL players out of a town of not very many people, a couple thousand people. 10 NFL players, including one that was the number 1 overall draft pick. And so we've had other people, very famous people, come out of our area. And so again, I think, and I have this theory that some people are born on energy ley lines that have an excess amount of energy or charisma or star power. And that's true if you look at, like, I can sit here and name everybody for y'all, but I'll spare you. But Elvis was born on the 33rd parallel, Johnny Cash, Hank Williams Jr. and Sr., Martin Luther King Jr., Oprah, Rosa Parks, literally Marilyn Monroe, who's who of uber famous people, not just like normal, they're American icons and things like that. So I think that there are people born on these lines with an excess amount of energy as well. So there's lows and then there's highs, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of in between. So yeah, that's just my take on it. I didn't mean to go a little too long for you, but getting kind of out of breath here.
That's fine. Take a breather. Actually, I like the shirt. I didn't know if you had a merch line or not. I'm pretty sure they would like that.
Yeah, I
That's pretty
do.
cool.
Yeah, sorry. I usually wear it just because I'm a marketer and when I was in the Air Force, I was a combat photographer, and when I got out, it didn't translate late to anything. You know, other than just taking pictures of babies and weddings and stuff like that. But that's not really my thing. I'm more of like a commercial photographer, you know, like photojournalist style. And so when I got out, I didn't have a job, so I had to go back to school to get a degree, and marketing kind of fit that. It's like, okay, I can use my photography with the marketing aspect, and then I learned how to do web design. And so I kind of created this brand around talking about this, and I think it helps with, you know, having a look to get guests on, and people take you seriously, you know, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I wear my merch to brand myself, and to also, if people want to buy them, they can, of course. But
Just let them know where they can get it, and then we'll go back over that at the end of the show. Your links in the description also. So
yeah, just the awakenedpodcast.com. I got a lot of stuff on there. I got
and support our brother.
books you can read on there too from other previous guests, and also books that I'm reading. So a lot of this stuff is, again, I'm looking at everything from an electromagnetic energy perspective. So I take the angle of, that's the angle I take on paranormal. And I think that that's a pretty serious angle to take, because not a lot of people are looking at it from that angle. Everybody's just kind of looking at it as ghosts and spirits and all this other stuff. And they're not really looking at the physical, you know, where are these things coming from? Why are they coming here? What is their purpose here? All this stuff, you know. I can sit there and listen to big shit, you know, these big Bigfoot shows, like, or these cryptid shows like the confessionals, and I love hearing the stories, but I want to know why where are they coming from? How are they coming in? That kind of stuff. So I kind of look at it from that angle.
So you're talking about ions, energy, frequencies, and do you think that there are some people that their energy, Bigfoot, the orbs, you think there are some people that have an energy level that attracts these kind of events or Bigfoot?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly are. And then there's bloodlines as well. There's RH negative bloodlines that people, if you're RH negative, you're highly likely to experience a lot of paranormal stuff. And so yeah, I think people can bring this stuff into their life. They can invite this stuff into their lives with Ouija boards and all these other things. When you open the door, even it gets down to, like, I tell people, this gets like I'm a very religious, I'm a Christian, okay, and I'm a very spiritual person, but I've been to a lot of churches that get the Holy Spirit. And if for people who just go to Baptist church, if you've never been to a Pentecostal church and seen someone get the Holy Spirit, it's a different thing. And I almost had this experience one time where I held my hand up and something started shaking my body pretty violently. And I pulled back, me and my best friend at the time, and we both kind of sat down. I was like, what in the world was that? Because it didn't feel right. And looking around the room, everybody was, you know, respectfully, I'm trying to say this respectfully, people were violently flipping around on the ground and speaking in tongues that you can't, you know, you don't know what the hell they're saying. So I look at it from the perspective of, when I held my hand up, I opened the door and I said, come on in, whatever's out there. And I think that maybe there are good entities out there, good energy, but I also think that there's bad energy out there. And when you open the door to this stuff, by even, you know, people who do a lot of cryptid hunting or ghost hunting, they have things that attach themselves, that these entities will attach themselves to people and they'll haunt their families and things like that. Because I think when you do this stuff, you're inviting them in, because everything is about consent. Everything is about consent in this world. again, what was I saying about these news agencies and stuff? It doesn't have to be true. They just have to get us to consent to the idea. So everything is about consent. And when you open your yeah, and so if you're experiencing a lot of bad stuff in your life, you have to pray down to the trauma. You have to pray down and say, you have to tell these things to get out, essentially, because you've allowed them in at some point. You've allowed them in by drinking spirits. You've allowed them in by doing Ouija boards as a kid that you didn't know you were doing, or whatever the case is. You know what I mean? And I think people have to be very careful with that kind of stuff. I accidentally did this one time with, like, just a couple months ago. I got some divining rods, or some water witching rods, whatever you want to call them, little copper wires. And I didn't know if it worked. So I wanted to test it out, and I found out that it actually does work. It will help you find water. But then I was just playing around with my son, and I let him do it, and it worked. It crossed. Typically the water witching will cross when you go find water. And let my son do it, and then I'd seen this video of this girl asking, divining rods questions, and it would answer the questions. So I was like, let me try this crazy stuff. And I stood to the right of the water where I knew the water was, and I said, okay, where's the water at? And these divining rods pointed to where the water was. I'm holding them perfectly still. There's not a gust of wind in sight. And so it pointed to where the water was, and I was like, oh my God. And so my son said, oh my God, that's demonic. And I was like, is this bad energy? And it said yes. It crossed and said yes. That's typically the answer. When they cross, they say yes. Wow. So I immediately realized that I had opened the door, and I immediately prayed that door would shut. God would put his bubble of light around us and our family and our house, and threw those things in the trash can. I put them in a trash bag, I pulled it tight, and I drove it down to the dump, and I threw it in the dump. You know what I mean?
I actually have something I wanted your Diane said, I am O negative, which is very rare. They call it angel blood because we can give our blood to anyone but cannot receive it, or sometimes called alien blood. Do you have an opinion?
Well, I think the RH negative, I don't know about the O negative. Although there is something about O negative that seems my grandma was as well. And my grandma was she was like a light worker sent from God. She was a pure angel. You know what I mean? Like, I think most people feel that way about their grandma, but I'm telling you, I really think my grandma was something special. And so yeah, it's possible. There's a lot of people, like, I got a red beard now, but I was born with bleach blonde hair. And there's this thing called the MCR1 gene, I believe is what it's called. I can't remember maybe it's MR1 or whatever it's called. I think it's MCR1. And people who are blonde haired and red haired have it. And they we can't get put to sleep easily. We have to get a lot. They have to put us, like, basically it's an act of God to put us to sleep. It's like heavy amounts of propofol and all this other stuff. When I go to the dentist, the local anesthesia doesn't work, and nobody ever believes me, but we have high tolerances for pain. We can't be put to sleep. So bloodlines are very interesting. And it should be noted that a lot of these, like, why are Mormons looking for, why do they own all the software that runs 23andMe or whatever, it's 22andMe or whatever it's called, and all these other DNA things? Like, what are they looking for? Somebody's looking for certain bloodlines, and I think that they are looking for that purpose because different blood types have probably different implications on royalty bloodlines of Christ, bloodlines of cryptids and other aliens and things like that. So I don't know about O negative, but I know RH negative is.
Wow. So let's go back to some of the things you find on the 33rd parallel. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and get them in there. Striker says, Bigfoot. Strikers, you kind of went through the Bigfoot part where you where their energy, and you have to go back and see that one at the first of the show, not unless you want to recap on it for Stryker.
I mean, I just think they're energy beings, and they're shapeshifters. I think they can shift into whenever they come through that plasma portal. They start off as a orb of light, and I think they can shift into humans. I think they can shift into sheep or horses or dogs or whatever they want to shape, whatever's convenient. I mean, there are people who I've talked to who've had encounters with different things. They've seen Fred Flintstone, right? So it's like maybe they only morph into what we can accept in our reality, or whatever the case is. Like a lot of kids, for example, will say they see cartoon characters, Ninja Turtles and things like that. They also call them imaginary friends. There's other things they call them, but so I think that they probably have this way of presenting themselves in the best way that we can relate or know what it is. Like we might be looking at the same entity, but you might see a big hairy Bigfoot and I might see a dog man or whatever the case is. I don't know. So that's just my opinion about it.
Well, that would make sense, or it does to me. So let's go into portals. I know that there is a portal on a ley line. And I know someone that was out there and experienced it. And 3 of the people that were close to that portal on the 33rd parallel got cancer. Coincidence? I don't know. Do you have thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't know. I just think that maybe that energy, puts us at like shakes our alignment in a way that, gets our body not aligned. Hang on one second. I'm gonna put my little dog out. She's about to bark. So give me a second. Y'all keep talking. I'm listening.
You go right ahead. For anyone that just joined, he made a really good point about the bells, how they took the bells, out of the churches and the buildings in the 1900s. And I thought the bells part of it was the most interesting to me, the toning that kept us grounded. And I thought I was telling them about the bells.
Yeah.
And the toning and how they took it out of the buildings. And I mean, that's true. You don't hear them like you used to when you were a kid. And, when you're a kid, you heard all the church bells going off all over the place. And I mean, I totally get that one. And the Himalayan toning bowls, that's a frequency for healing and to bring your frequency up higher.
Yeah. Correct. You ever seen the babies when they're crying? A lot of Asian cultures still kind of hit these bowls and it goes a dong, and then the baby just immediately stops crying. So like there's certainly something to all the frequency talk,
Well, okay. So let's just go off the road. We've hit on Bigfoot, frequencies, healing. What's the strangest thing that in your research and your desire to discover the answers out there, what is the strangest or most unsettling thing that you feel like it's your duty to bring to people's attention?
First of all, I think a lot of the things I say is speculation. I mean, I've never seen, anything myself, right? I've never seen like any crazy things shift in front of me, but there's plenty of people in this world who have, millions and millions of people. So everything I say is coming from, I listen to my intuition a lot. And I don't know if that's like any kind of a special quality or anything like that, but I don't work a 9-to-5 job. I have my own company. And so I have this freedom to do what I want to do. And I have this, freedom to go wherever I want to go, explore higher versions of myself. And I think when you do that, you're opening yourself up to listening to God. You're tuning yourself closer to God, and you can hear things better. You can experience things better. You get better downloads from God. And you experience a lot of synchronicities and angel numbers and things like that. So you'll have interactions with what I call, and what most people who have these these things, these weird synchronicities. So a synchronicity, for those who don't know, is something that it's a coincidence that happens, but it seems greater than a coincidence. You know, like I was like I'm reading a book, or I'll give you a better one. My wife was my dog Penny had just died. And that night my wife was reading a Stephen King book, and it was her dog, really. It wasn't really my dog, it was her dog. And in the book, there was a page in the book, and it was talking about a dog named Penny. And Penny died in the book as well. And the book said Penny was a good dog. And so like that's a meaningful coincidence that's happening at the same time. Or my wife told me, I was hanging out with my kids on the couch one time watching YouTube, and my wife said, all right, everybody, let's go get a bath. And she was kind of angry. And when she said bath, the word bath appeared on the screen like a Batman pow from the 60s. You know what I mean? When they punch somebody, it hit pow. That's what it said. It said bath at the same time that she said bath. So again, that's another it's bigger than a coincidence. That's kind of a weird thing that happened. And once you start tuning yourself to that, to seeing these messages all the time, you'll start to see that they're everywhere all the time. You can't avoid them. And to me, to most people who get these things, they get them, they say the same thing. It's our guides, our higher selves, or higher, maybe it's God, maybe it's angels, but it's something greater than us that's guiding us, telling us we're on the right path. And so I get things that's intuitive feelings a lot of times, but I have never seen anything like crazy. But my intuition tells me that something far more sinister happened a long time ago. And we, like there's areas, there's areas in the, like I said, along the 33rd parallel that if people saw them in person, they would go, there's no way. About 50 miles or about 40 miles away from where I'm at, there's a place, for example, called 40 Acre Rock. Now, there's no mountains where I'm at. This is the lowland of South Carolina. You know, it's called the Low Country, right? So there's no mountains, but all of it out of nowhere, there's this 40 acres worth of flat rock that appears to be some sort of a temple, like you're standing on top of a temple. And I think what we saw with the hurricane when it hit North Carolina, what was it? What was the town that got flooded real bad that's near Asheville? God, I can't remember. Chimney Rock. Chimney Rock got flooded real bad. When it was flooded, the aftermath created this mud that goes to the ceiling of all these buildings. Well, if that mud is never cleared out, eventually trees will start to grow, and this town will be buried underneath this soil, underneath this flooded area. And then over time, more floods happen, different things. So I think that we are on top of many different civilizations throughout millions and millions of years. And I think they want us to believe that we're only a few thousand years old, or that civilization's only a few thousand years old, but that's just not the case. I think that, again, there are probably civilizations that are very, very 2 miles deep underneath the Earth's surface. And there's a lot of evidence to prove that. A lot of these buildings, all these Capitol buildings I mentioned earlier, are buried, you know, from the mud flood of Tartaria. That's what most people call it. And if you're into that, if you are into hidden history, Tartaria is definitely something you need to look into, because there's a lot of evidence that these buildings are, you know, when we think about like the tunnels in New York City, the subways and all this stuff, where's the pictures of them building this stuff? Where's the pictures of them creating tunnels? And how do we create tunnels that were miles and miles and miles and miles and miles long? Or did we just find these places because, again, they were founded, and then we just you know, again, reused them or repurposed them. Yeah, recycled them. You know what I mean? Because if you see over and over there in these different countries, and even in the United States, they're discovering like in Italy, for example, they tore down a building, and as they started excavating the ground to build another building, they discovered there was like an old Roman style building underneath it. What
Uh-huh.
so much on it? It's really picking up lately. Yeah, it feels like. Well, it's there's a thinning of the veil. That's really what I think is going on. There's more
That's
light coming through. Yeah, and I think that most people. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to apologize for getting you off the train of thought, but you hit on that, and I apologize. But you, a thinning of the veil was where I wanted to go. But I'm sorry. Just carry. I'm gonna.
No, that's fine. I mean, I want you to jump in. I'm getting out of breath here, but yeah, I think there's a thinning of the veil, and we're starting to see more UFOs and more crazy stuff happen. And what those things are demons. So we're starting to see more demons. More light is shining, and I think that we're going to start seeing more of that spiritual battle that we've heard about in church for all our lives. So,
Brad,
um,
why don't you just take you a break and get you some water and clear your throat, and I'll go
I'm
through
good.
and read some of these. We're so engrossed in what you're saying that I mean it's just really fascinating, and we don't get a lot of this. And I don't want you to take. I want you to enjoy the show and not feel like you.
This is my favorite thing to do. Is like I love live chats. I got a great audience on Spotify and Apple, but I don't have a YouTube channel that's got a great audience. I can't interact with people, so it's really cool to see live chats and hear. Like I wish I had an audience like that was interacting with me all the time. I guess I could get one eventually if I really worked hard at a YouTube channel. I
Well,
just
we're gonna push your YouTube and your all of that, and I can guarantee you that probably 90% of the people in this chat is going to go check you out because they like what you what you're doing.
well, I
Twinkle
think
toes. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say I think that the people that I'm bringing on my show, they're very smart. They're do way more research than me. They're way smarter than me with this stuff, and we're all coming to the same idea, the same knowledge that again the veil is thinning. That maybe this is the end of the thousand, the little season of Satan, and maybe the millennium reign of Christ will come again. Like there's a lot of that kind of talk in the shows I do, and then the circles I run. There's a lot of talk about the Nephilim and the fallen angels and their bloodlines and stuff like that. So if you want to listen to that kind of stuff, you can listen and tune in to my show. But I cover a lot of the talk about electromagnetic frequencies, energy, the stuff that we as kids would be like, oh, that's hippie shit, but now I'm like, you know,
You
I'm
get
like,
older.
maybe we should hug trees more. You know what I mean? Like,
It comes from somewhere. Was it your
yeah.
show where they were talking about Elvis had healing powers and he was born on the 33rd parallel? Was that your show?
Yeah, I had a guy named Miguel Connor on my show, and he wrote a book called America's Magician, and great read for those who want to check it out. But basically, he did a lot of research on. He had this intuitive download as well, if you will, from God that told him to write this book on Elvis. He said he didn't care about Elvis at all, but he ended up writing a book on Elvis. And my 2 cents of it was like, hey, he was born on the 33rd parallel, but his was more or less like, he realized that his power, the words, how powerful his words were. He had a twin. Elvis had a twin at birth a twin brother that he lost, that he still maintained communication with through the other side somehow. He would get visions of himself singing on stage in front of large audiences when he was a kid. And so there's a lot of weird things with Elvis where he was almost like a magician, and he could make it rain and he could do all these crazy things. And I think we all have that ability. That I have a friend named Ry Voss who has a great show that he'd be great on this show, called Codega's Codex of Curiosities. It's a alliteration, but he was telling me that he can cloud bust. He can just look at clouds for a period of time until they just disperse. And so there's something with our minds that we can manipulate energy, and so that Miguel thinks that Elvis was very much tapped into that, and I can agree. I think so too.
So there was if I'm not mistaken, because I mean I was binging on your show and um tinfoil tale, or yeah, tinfoil tales, my buddy turned me on to you, and I was like, I binged on your shows. But there was a wreck where Elvis, the guy, I think the guy was having a heart attack, and Elvis got stopped traffic, got out, and laid hands on this guy.
Yeah, he fixed his broken leg or whatever it was, and yeah,
Yeah, that was
so.
pretty.
But see, Miguel looked into the stories that his wife would tell and his people around him would tell. So it wasn't just coming from like nobody. It wasn't just coming from like things reported on the internet. It was coming from people that knew him very well, and I guess Elvis was kind of burdened by it as well, because it was like a superpower almost. So, and again, I think people have just higher charisma levels. And to be honest with you, I think that's why a lot of these stars, why do they call stars, by the way, lots of light and energy, they have handlers. Colonel Tom was Elvis's handler, right? Like they always have some kind of a handler that kind of manages them or controls them in a certain way.
Kind of locks them down a little bit.
Yeah. So it's again, you got to read his book. Miguel knows a lot more about it than I do. I'm just relaying the information. That's all.
So I was trying to hold this question in. That's why I interrupt all the time, because I lost my train of thoughts. Do you guys have any questions for Brad before we move on to whatever else comes up? Hey, William. And if I didn't, I get to tell everyone, hey, in the chat, hello, everyone. So when you're looking, I wanted to go back to the thinning of the veil. That fascinates me and scares me. Is that why you think there's an uptick and people seeing strange things?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was saying earlier. I think for sure it's the, well, I think also, we also have phones. So maybe this stuff has always been present. We're just seeing it more because we're kind of focused more on we're looking at the sky a little bit more, I guess. You can't see these things in polluted areas a lot of times, I guess, just because, the light, there's too much light pollution. But I do think they have like cloaking abilities and things like that. And I think that they are, again, they can come in and out whenever they want. There's underground bases all over the United States and all over the world, really, all out in the ocean. There's a few passages in the Bible that talks about basically like these Nephilim living under the water. So like that's pretty much where these UFOs or these USOs come from. But yeah, I think there is a veil thinning just because, again, it's not a surprise that everybody's sort of waking up around the same time. I think people can sense there's something going on. And, I think that's why there's some success on my show, because I feel like I do have a little bit of success very early on, very quickly. And mostly because of the guests, but also because I'm not the only one going through an awakening. Like I'm just trying to help shed light on some of this stuff, like kind of what I'm sensing and what I'm feeling. And it's if you look into some of this stuff a little bit more, you can start to see that the government is kind of leading us down that path as well. They're kind of like disclosure going on and stuff like that. And I think that they're trying to make it look like they got a handle on things when they don't really have a handle on things. But I think it's always biblical. It's always been biblical, and they know that it's very something religious. There was Tucker Carlson talked about it on Joe Rogan's show, right? Tucker Carlson was mentioning how he heard from somebody that it was like aliens. These things, I mean, these things are these aliens are demons.
I've heard that was demonic.
Yeah. And that's the general consensus. And the devil will disguise himself as an angel of light. And so people are constantly being fooled by these things, thinking that they have the best intentions in mind so when they see these things, there's a guy out of North Carolina, Chris Bledsoe, who wrote a book called UFO of God. Yeah. He interacts with these entities a lot, and he seems to think that they are good entities. And I'm not doubting what he's saying, but I am very cautious as to like, they keep telling him that, we're good light beings. Of course the devil would say that, right? Like, and the Bible says over and over, don't talk to mediums and things like that. My wife had to remind me of that because I was talking to a alleged psychic medium, and really what I think it is I think there's certain people who can communicate with the other side, and they're being manipulated because these things are called the Watchers, right? These aliens, these demons are called the Watchers. They watch us because they just sit there like a television screen and they can see us, but they can't interact with us. They can't come into you know they see us enjoying life. They see us eating and drinking and smoking and sleeping, sleeping with people and stuff like that. And so they want that, and they know all about us from the time we're born. And so like if they know that your grandma makes an amazing blueberry pie and you've always loved your grandma's blueberry pie, they're going to tell us, alleged psychic medium, like, hey, tell her that your grandma made the best blueberry pie and that I'm the grandma, right? And so
Yeah.
when that psychic medium tells you, hey, your grandma just told me that you used to love her blueberry pies, of course you're going to be like, immediately go, that's my grandma, that's got to be my grandma. But it's these demons they've been watching you your whole life. And so that's where it comes from.
Let me read this to you. Your thoughts on this. I was always told I wasn't following God because I see things. I believe I have a relationship with God. It confuses me because they say God doesn't give you those gifts. Is that true?
Listen, I don't know.
Your opinion. She's asking your opinion.
No, I know, but my opinion for sure. Like I'm not an expert in anything. And funny because somebody reached out to me one time after I was on tinfoil hat, and they said, should I buy a house on the 33rd parallel? And I'm like, listen, man, I can't even. I got my own life is in disarray. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm no expert in any of this stuff. But what I would generally say about what is true about myself is like, if it feels right, then it's probably right. If it feels wrong, then it's probably wrong. Like if you feel like God's speaking to you, then that's what it is. Because your intuition is specifically tuned to you. It's inside tuned, intuition inside tuned to you. And so yeah, I don't put much stock into what other Christians are saying, because Christians live in this fear all the time. And they're in this box, and they have to be in this box. They have to think inside this box all the time. But I think the universe is way crazier than what we know or what we can possibly imagine. And God works in crazier ways than we can even, our little pea brains can even think of. So, if you feel like it's God talking to you, then it's probably God, right? I mean, that, like, I talked to the actor John Voight one time. Crazy conversation, man. It was unbelievable. He called me out of the blue because I emailed him. I met him in 2009, and I found his email, and not back in February, and I emailed him just to say hi. Hey, I met you. It was good. I just came across your email. And anyways, he called me up, and we talked on the phone. This is John Voight, the actor, and he called me up, and we talked for 45 minutes on the phone, and we had the best conversation about spirituality. And he told me that his life changed one time when he was laying on the ground and he was depressed. He was an actor, but he wasn't like a great actor or anything. And he was just depressed. This was like in the 60s. And he was laying on the ground, and he said, why, God, why is this so hard? And then he heard God's voice in his ear say, it's supposed to be hard, And so he said he sat up like, what the hell was that? And he looked around like, he's like, I heard a voice. And so all night it bothered him. Like, what was that? Was that God? Was that God's voice? And he said it was pretty distinct. And to him, it was clearly God's voice. Right. Like, we don't know what that could have been, but to him, he felt like it was God's voice. And then he said, all right, God, if this is you, then give me another sign. And the next morning, he got another sign from God. And so I think God speaks to us in different ways,
What were we going to say? If you If you say you believe in biblical truths, then you must accept that prophets exist and they have visions. But that's different than channeling something. That's different than channeling bad energy for someone to use somebody as an opening to manifest something dark.
Well, I think that prophets, it's funny because if you told somebody today I had a vision from God, they would think you're crazy. But back then they documented it and they said, oh man, Ezekiel, he had an interaction with this, this circle thing with eyes all over his body that was glowing like fire and stuff like that. And I had this conversation with my wife. I said, did God stop making prophets, 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago, or however long the Bible was written? And, but I'm sorry.
No, I'm going to shut up and let you finish, sir.
No, I just think that I don't know that anybody's prophets, but I do think that God uses us as vessels for his will. And I think that that's what I'm being used for in a way, for God's will. And I think that as long as you allow yourself to be a vessel for God's will, then you're not a prophet, but it's like you're just letting God use you for whatever message he needs to give people. I mean, when I started doing this, I heard, I felt like I had this calling, and I kept telling people, I'm like, I feel like I should start a podcast. I feel like I should talk about this stuff. Now I know what preachers are saying when they said they felt like they were called to be a minister. I get that. I understand what that means now, because I used to think that that's stupid. Nobody really is called to do that. They have to have some kind of different agenda. And that might be true for some people, but certainly the calling, answering the calling for God's will, is what I think that modern day prophets are. I think we all can be used for God's will if we open ourselves up to it.
Well, I think that I was born to be a protector, so I went through the field of law enforcement because that's just something I do naturally. You don't have to be family or friend. It's just, I think some of us are protectors. So we're not going to get in like debates, but let's read this. And if you have a comment, you can. The spirits I'm talking about are called familiar spirits. It's mentioned in the Bible. We talked about that earlier. They talk to you through mediums, etc. But God gives us many gifts according to the Bibles, and you hit on that earlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and this says, William said, but what's the difference between a prophet and a vessel?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know, just whatever you call it. Some people call it like star seeds. Some people call it indigo children. Some people call it light workers. There's different names. It's not, prophet isn't the only thing. But I do think that God does use people in different ways. For example, he used Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow had an athletic ability, right? And he used Tim Tebow to spread a message to millions of people. And he's continuing that mission to just being a vessel for God's will. And he's continuing that mission into pedophilia and stuff like that, and sex trafficking. And, that's a pretty powerful, when you're literally affecting people. Tim Tebow is not a prophet. Everybody knows he's not a prophet. So, but back in the day, you might have called him a prophet. You might have said Tim Tebow is a prophet, or, there might have been stories about him. And maybe in the future, there will be future books or, future things where people say this guy named Tim Tebow was going around and changing everybody and, bringing them closer to God and that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I just think it's a perspective thing. You know what I mean?
Two things I want to hit on. The sequence of numbers, like when you see 1111 or 222 or 6, I don't want to say 6, but 3, you start to see you start to see it a lot in your life. Like some people think that's the angels talking to you. Next thing I want to hit on is dumbs. And then I want to kind of wrap it up because we've had you on for like an hour and 30 minutes, but I'm really interested in your thoughts on thumbs. But let's hit the numbers first.
I don't know what word you're saying. Thumbs or
dumbs? The what underground tunnel of domes.
Oh, I don't even know what that is. I'll be honest with you. I've never heard of that.
Underground tunnels. They call them domes.
No, I didn't know that was the name of it. I just don't know much about it. I mean, I know there's underground bases and stuff like that. And again, that just ties into, I got a whole Microsoft Word document full of these underground basis stories. If you want to hear about, sorry about my dog barking in the background, but yeah, but with angel numbers, when you see 222, 333, 444, like I was saying earlier, those are signs or synchronicities or whatever you want to call it. And that's usually, in my opinion, that it's an angel or a spirit guide or a god, and positive energies, let's just say, that are guiding you along in life. Like they're telling you, like, yep, that's what you're supposed to do. Like every time I get them, I acknowledge it, because that's kind of what I feel like. I feel like it's our guardian angels saying you're on the right path. Sometimes I'll get a jolt through my body, like when I'm doing something and it feels perfect or right. It's like my body just vibrates from head to toe, and it's almost, in my opinion, it's almost as if something runs its hand through my entire body saying, yes, you got it, you did it, whatever that was, whatever lesson I was supposed to learn, whatever turn I was supposed to take, whatever.
You're
I
on
had this
track.
guy. Yeah, you're on track. And I had this guy come to my house one time to put up gutters. We just built a house a couple years ago, and he put up gutters, and he said, we started talking about a lot of this kind of stuff, and I asked him about angel numbers, because I started talking about angel numbers, and he took off his ring and he showed me a tattoo of 222 on his finger. And it was like both of us needed those signs at that time. It's hard to explain, but later on that day, he and I just had these angel numbers all day long, as if the angels were like celebrating that we had that conversation. Like it was a moment that we both agreed that was something big or special to our guides or our angels or our spirit guides or whatever you want to call them. So when you get them, I just acknowledge it and go, oh, okay, thanks. Like I lived in another town, and my wife and I were considering moving to this town we're in now. And we went to look at a house, and I Googled how long it would take from one point to the other, from one house to the other. And it was exactly 44.4 miles. And I look at things like that as a message, like, that's the path, go, and in this case, it was literally the path. But I just take them as like these signs, these paths, hey, you're on the right path. It's just these acknowledgments. But yeah, I wish I knew more about DUMBs, and maybe you can tell me more about DUMBs, because I just don't.
Well, the underground tunnels. Anyone that knows me knows I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. So it's the underground tunnels. I know Fort Bragg has them, and you're not supposed to know about it. But it's some crazy stuff goes on. It's almost like they're a pathway, and some people say there's aliens under there. Some people say there's energy that makes granite.
Well, I think we do have a Faustian bargain with demons. I think when Roswell happened, which was on the 33rd parallel, by the way, like I said before, when the Roswell crash happened, I think we recovered entities, and I think that we agreed to give them human sacrifice in the exchange for technological advances, scientific discovery, medicines, different things. But we have to continue giving these demons blood sacrifices. And there's evidence of blood sacrifice for hundreds of thousands of years, right? And so it seems like there's this Faustian bargain where, again, all these cryptids always live in the national forest, and we're keeping them at bay almost by giving them these sacrifices. If you look at the Missing 411 documentaries and stuff like that, it touches on some of this stuff. All these missing people around these same areas in the national forest, and the government comes in and just kind of goes, yeah, there's nothing to see here. And nothing ever gets done. Nobody ever gets found. It's just chalked up as another person missing in the national forest. And I think, in my opinion, they're just letting these things happen, and they're given in exchange for, advancements in human ingenuity and technologies and metals and all these other different things. So
I have to say I kind of lean that way, and even just saying it verbally, it sounds crazy, but there's a lot of darkness that goes on, and it's almost like it's starting to come to the surface, like the thinning of the veil, like the Watchers. But when you say that those acts are probably is what's keeping them at bay in the woods, that I mean that makes sense because people always say this like they're waiting. It's almost like they're waiting on a signal to come out. But I've heard good things about them too. I don't know, but that's why I have people on with different opinions, and because it is something we need to have open dialogue about. And Carl says, Brad, thanks for sharing, and it's appreciated.
Yeah, I don't listen. I don't know shit, guys. I'm just telling you, like, this is just how I feel about things. And I think a lot of times people get. I'm not an expert in anything. I'm a trailer trash dum dum from South Carolina. I promise you. I just look into things a little bit more than most people. That's all it is. I read a couple more documents. I read a couple more books and that kind of stuff. I talk to other like-minded people who share ideas. And so a lot of the things I'm talking about today have come from some of these other great people like JT Follows JC and Paul Stobbs and guys like that I've had on my show. A lot of great minds out there thinking on this stuff. We're the modern day philosophers in a lot of ways. I mean, if that makes any, we're no Socrates or Plato or anything like that, but like we're kind of out there hashing out these ideas with each other. And this is probably what they used to do back in the day, just sit around and just talk to each other about these ideas and free from restraint of like a religion or anything that kind of puts them in this box and makes them feel a certain way. Because even when I start reading about some of this stuff, my Christian background kind of takes me back a little, kind of restrains me a little bit and makes me think about things in a different way or what have you. So it's not a bad thing is what I'm saying. It's just, it kind of pulls me back in a little bit to go, hey, don't get too crazy with this stuff. Like remember that God's got it. Like you can get lost in cataclysms. Like what's going to happen? Is there another cataclysm coming that somebody knows about and we don't know about? But that's all in God's hands. That's not in, you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's something interesting. Greg that just jumped in the chat. He actually was about to get attacked by a Bigfoot, and he rebuked them in God's name. Started praying. They left. I mean, they left him alone, and he was able to retreat. But it goes back to what you were saying a while ago, and ties into everything. But you hear those things.
Well, it's the story of vampires, right? You got to let the vampires in your house. Again, this is about consent, and it's the same with Christ. On the opposite side of the vampires is the same with Christ. You got to let Christ into your heart, right? Yeah. And so everything is about consent. And so when you tell these things that, hey, I'm on the side of light, I'm on Christ's side, then these things have to go away because Christ is the all powerful one. There's no, they know who the creator is, right? They know they can't cross these lines. God gives us free will. And if we consent to anything, that's on us, but he gives us the free will to do that. So again, everything's about consent. Don't let the vampires in, these stories have been around forever. And so it's not, we're just looking at it through a modern day lens. We look at vampires like it's fiction, but I think all these myths come from somewhere.
Some source of truth.
Yeah.
Well, it's I even hate to bring it up, adrenochrome. You get the vampires, the drinking of the blood, the adrenochrome, it gives you youth. So it would and it goes back to that crazy chick that used to bathe in the blood to stay young. Remember way back I cannot remember her name. She was in the castle.
They're still doing that today. There's I won't say names because I don't know this for sure and I don't want to get libeled for anything, but there's a modern day stuff going on like that in a lot of the Hollywood circles, a lot of the music circles, that kind of stuff. And it's obviously becoming pretty evident that stuff is going on. Yeah.
he was talking about. So let's go back to the ley lines before we close it. See, William, you're my buddy. Elizabeth, but I can't even say that, whatever her name is. That chick right there, she's the one that did it. Have you heard of her?
No, I haven't. No.
You should go back and write that down and look into her because it ties into exactly that.
Okay.
So, do you guys have any questions before we start to tie things up? Because he's a very interesting guest, and it took me. I was trying to get him back in July. We just kept missing each other, and he's very interested. And if you guys have any questions, put them up there. And
I promise you,
oh,
I'm
Greg,
not that
this is
interesting.
this is for. Oh no, you're. Greg was saying this is when he rebuked them. He says all three were angry, three of them at the same time, and he rebuked them, and he was able to get away. And
when you go home tonight, or where I'm sure most of you are home, but when you're alone tonight and maybe nobody's around, try saying to yourself, talking to your body, to yourself, demons, get out of my body now, and say it loud and emphatically. I did that before, and all 3 times in a row, and every time I did it, my body vibrated extremely hard, as if something happened. And so when people get baptized and stuff like that, a lot of times that's what the baptism is you're freeing yourselves from those demons and things like that. That's why you'll see some people. I saw one lady almost levitate the other day from a baptism that she had. So
wow, wait. So
I didn't see it in person.
That's the darkness lifting.
Leaving her body, you know what I mean? Leaving, that's what I think. A lot of these things, like they're not meant to be in our body. These things aren't meant to be in our, in this meat suit that we wear. They are disembodied. So when you see people on drugs, and I'm sure people have seen videos of like the Kensington area of Philadelphia where these people are walking around like zombies. They're all drugged out. I think that's because these entities are inside them, and they don't know how to operate these bodies, right? It's like they always look super uncomfortable. And it's the same whenever you see someone get the Holy Spirit, the alleged Holy Spirit. I don't want to blaspheme anything, but it looks uncomfortable. It looks unpleasant. People are sweating profusely, and their eyes are wide, and they're like flipping around on the ground and stuff like that. It doesn't look like something loving is possessing them almost. So
now let's see. I think it was but that would depend on the person too. Twinkle Toes was said she didn't agree with that, and she said and it's allowed. She said she was a Pentecostal and she didn't think it was a negative energy. She says, considering I grew up Pentecostal, I'd have to disagree
sure.
that. But I think that depends on the person and how they take it.
I do too. And I just want to say that I don't disagree with you with that. That's everybody's interpretation of what that is and what that feels like. My interpretation was it didn't look good, or it didn't look loving. So I certainly don't mean to offend you or criticize you for anything that you believe in. And lots of my best friends and family members go to these kinds of churches, so I'm certainly not talking shit about anybody, for sure. I love these people, and they're smart people, and so are you. I just from my own experience, I didn't see that. I didn't feel that. I didn't experience that same thing.
Well, this is a platform where people are, they're allowed to express themselves without it being, a negative reaction with each other. And we like to communicate, and we like to toss things out there, and we're all entitled to our opinions. And, the people there appreciate, being able to go back and forth with people on that. So that's not a negative. That's actually something that's encouraged around here. So the ley lines, the 33rd parallel. what else is going on the 33rd parallel? And we'll tie it up with that. It's from California all the way across the ocean.
There's a lot of strange things that happen on these ley lines from, a lot of the communication towers and stuff where we have like Goldstone Earth to Space Communications Center is like on the 34th parallel or something along those lines. It's not exactly the 33rd parallel. And for a better understanding of what I'm saying, we look at the 33rd parallel, or a lot of times people think that I'm just specifically talking about just the 33rd parallel. And I think that the 33rd parallel actually is something that's a region that's probably covering from the 32nd to the 35th or 36th parallel. I don't think it's a line or a number that we know of, because Earth, I don't think we know everything about Earth. You know what I mean? Like we can just say that's the line or whatever the case, but I think it's a region. And in that region, you can kind of rope in a lot of stuff. Now, some people would say that 33rd parallel is close to the equator. So, of course, there's going to be a lot more people living there. Of course, there's going to be a lot more sightings and things that happen on the 33rd, certainly. But when you start seeing the connection there, it's kind of hard to unsee. All the major wars are started on, the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War. That's 33rd parallel. A lot of these superstition mountains in Arizona, Mount Kailash in the in the Tibet, you got the Tibetan monks, and you got pyramids in China, you got Temple Mount in Jerusalem, you got Mount Hermon where the fallen angels fell to earth. The 33% of fallen angels fell to earth. Again, you got the Bermuda Triangle. There's tons of places in Arizona. The Sedona Vortex, and you got, again, the Superstition Mountains that I mentioned before. There's places in New Mexico. Almost all of the nuclear bombs in history have been dropped on the 33rd parallel, and a lot of people don't know that. Don't know that. And the White Sands missile range is on the 33rd parallel in New Mexico. And Roswell is on the 33rd parallel. And Roswell was the home of the 506th bombardment group that dropped the bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, which was also on the 33rd parallel. So why were they testing bombs on the 33rd parallel and then dropping bombs on the 33rd parallel? And then that ties into a theory that a guy named Bruce Cathy wrote about, where he talked about the harmonics of Earth, the Earth heartbeat, if you will, lining up with the sun's heartbeat. And when a bomb is dropped at a certain time, it causes a mass effect. That's the only time a nuclear bomb can be dropped. In order for it to have a mass effect, is when these two energies line up, when the energies of Earth and the energies of the sun line up. And that's Bruce Cathy's. He wrote a great book called Harmonic 33 that you guys can read on that. But essentially, I think that they are continuously blowing up this grid, and these entities, these demons, are constantly trying to repair the grid. Okay, so I know it's kind of a stretch, but a lot of this stuff, again,
back to what you said at the beginning. If people didn't catch the beginning of the show, which goes back to Bigfoot, in a way, it does.
Yeah, they're rebuilding. They're doing something. It would appear, and again, every time they show up, military jets chase them off. So I think what's happening is, I think there's two factions. I think there's a group of people. So right after, on July 7th, 1947 was when Roswell happened. 3 weeks later, the National Security Act was signed by President Truman, who was the 33rd president, by the way, on board the Sacred Cow, which was the original Air Force One. He signed into law the creation of the CIA, the Air Force, all these different entities. So I think that there are organizations that are working with these things, and then I think there's other parts of the government that don't know about that, and they're chasing these things off, right? So I think that there's two different things going on at the same time. But essentially, again, that 33rd parallel line, there's so many things on it. There's so many petroglyphs and geoglyphs and what do you call it? The megalithic structures, like I mentioned earlier. You got effigies, you got pyramids, you got Moundville pyramids in in Tuscaloosa, and then you got the Winterville pyramids in Greenville, Mississippi. Both are on the 33rd.
Wow.
You got Poverty Point, Louisiana, which is right on the like 32nd or something like that, 32nd.8 or something like that, which is another massive pyramid, like thousands of pyramids out there. Kennedy was assassinated on the 33rd parallel in Dallas. There's a place called Rockwall, Texas, which is where they discovered these rock walls underneath the earth, and they found giant's bones. And that's also the home of Alex Jones by coincidence, right? And then that's also Rockwall, Texas, is where 4 of the 5 red heifers came from for the red heifer ritual sacrifice that's supposed to take place. So there's a lot of tie-in to all these things. Again, it's not just like, me just kind of making things up as I go. It's a lot of very strange, like what a coincidence that they found the perfect. Now, if you don't know the story of the red heifer rituals, there's red cows that have to be perfect, that have to be sacrificed in a certain religion. Let's just say that to bring about a new covenant. I got a great episode on it where the guy who wrote a book about it called The Red Heifer Ritual, his name is Mondo Gonzalez. I did an episode with him. You got to watch it. It's worth a watch, I think. And his book is worth a read. But so again, there's a lot of these tie-ins that just, you can't make up these coincidences. There's, you got Club 33, which is the Disney Club, and Disneyland is in California on the 33rd. You got the Catalina Islands, which is famously, got a lot of UFO sightings out there, alleged underground military bases, things like that. I mean, I can go on and on with all this stuff. I don't, it's like interesting to talk about, but like, there's really a lot of stuff. And I wrote as much as I could down on my website, but there's a lot more. And even now people are just bringing more and more stuff to me now that I'm talking about the 33rd parallel a lot. That's just, I got a whole stack of papers right here I got to read through where there's even more stuff that I haven't even talked about on some of these shows. So, but again, it's just an energy ley line. There was an earth energy grid that was highly functional at some point, and we used to all have free energy, and they're keeping that away from us. And, for whatever reason.
Well, control people, but isn't the wars that are created and they're all connected, but all the death of the war would be like a great sacrifice, right?
Excuse me. Yes. So I think that there's people who worship the fallen angels as well. There's a faction of people who have to do everything in the name of 33 or the number of 33. And so they have to make sacrifices. And when they make sacrifices, they have to do it again. They have to show that number somehow. And a good example of that is like with the Russia-Ukraine war, for example, they wanted Ukraine to become the 33rd member of NATO. That's another little example. Like I said, all the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan, the Syrian war, a lot of this stuff, even the war in Israel right now, right? All on or along the 33rd parallel. So I think there's a lot of, in the name of 33, Marilyn Monroe, John F. Kennedy, a lot of these people have been sacrificed on the 33rd parallel. Kobe Bryant, for example, in LA, because LA is on the 33rd parallel, like I mentioned earlier. Oh, Joshua Tree is another one on the 33rd parallel. We're famous for crazy stuff like portals and stuff going on out there. So again, just a lot of this kind of stuff. I can go on and on about all this, but I feel like talking about it is, I'm just trying to really show that there was once an energy grid that connected us all, and that was destroyed somehow in some way, whether it be a cataclysm or whether it be nuclear bombs or whatever the case is. So
I do have 2 questions for you, and then we're going to let you tie up unless another one pops up, because you said, just joking. I think you're doing a good service for people. Greg says, I've seen people on drugs that look like they've had demons.
yeah.
What if drugs make it a person easier for a demon possessed. That would be almost like the Ouija board.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
for sure. I think so. Yeah, I think you're right. That's what happens with drugs, alcohol, pornography. I think with porn, for example, when we build up our semen or our orgasm, we are elevating our consciousness, and the constant emptying of that lowers our consciousness back to its beginning again, which is true for a lot of people. And this is, I guess I shouldn't bring it up because it gets kind of graphic with that. But I do think that you're resetting your consciousness when you have sex or watch porn. You're resetting your consciousness every time. Let's just say that.
Okay. And Erica said, "Can we have a second show with Brad?"
Yeah, of course.
It might take me 6 months to get home.
I talk a lot about the same stuff though, y'all. So like I feel like there's a lot more I could talk about, I guess, but it's like I do feel like I talk about the same topics all the time on these shows. But there's a lot of cool things going on. My wife's playing sports was number 33. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
he says my wife playing sports was 30. Number playing sports was 33. She's pretty mean. That's naughty. And she said, and JFK and Eminem were a thing.
Yep.
Wow. So yeah, so for all these people that have been so interested in everything you have told us tonight, let them know where they can find you and how you get the email is on the website and where your platforms are so they can go subscribe. And I'm going to ask everyone in here to go find them and subscribe because he was coughing all through the interview. You could tell he was just struggling to get through it, and he stayed the course. And I think doing something, he's very interesting, and I do want to have him back, but I'm sorry.
Well, I cough a lot when I get nervous, so I do that on shows a lot, believe it or not. So it's not necessarily because I am thirsty. I keep trying to drink water because I'm talking a lot. But yeah, if you guys, I'm not as good on my own show as I am probably on other shows, because I get the freedom to talk more on these shows, versus like being a host. Being a host is a lot harder. You have to constantly feel like you have to fill in dead space, and you can't really get your opinion across. But if you want to follow me, you can. Follow me on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I would appreciate that. And more importantly, if you could give me a review on Apple or Spotify, that would help me tremendously, because we get rankings. Typically you get rankings based off of reviews and stuff like that. So like if people come to or if people want to come on my show, if I invite them to come on my show, a lot of times people will go and look at your listen scores from listen notes. And if you're in the top percentage, they'll take you more seriously. And so like reviews help us get that better percentage score, and it puts us in front of a lot more listeners. So I get better guests and I get in front of a lot more people. So reviews are very important, and so I'd like to push those. If you don't have to listen, I think it forces you to listen to 3 episodes. You don't have to listen to those episodes, just kind of fast forward through a couple of them, and then it'll allow you to give a review. But those reviews help out tremendously. And you can find me online at theawakenedpodcast.com to find all of those links. And if you want to follow me on YouTube and Rumble, that's fine. I don't have a lot of content on there, but mostly the Awakened Podcast 33 on everything. Instagram, YouTube is the Awakened Pod, and Rumble is the Awakened Podcast. So yeah, but thank you very much for letting me come on your show and talk and interact with your great audience. Everybody seems very sweet. Everybody's been super amazing. Asking the right questions, it seems like too. I know that I'm not much of a Bigfoot, I don't have Bigfoot stories or anything like that, but I think it's important to talk about what these things are, who they are, and where they're coming from, and what their goal is. And I don't know that, but I'm trying to figure all that stuff out. So,
and for the folks that was late joining, you got to go back, listen to it, because he hit some pretty interesting stuff with the Bigfoot and the 33rd parallel. And you know, Brad, you are officially a part of the Not So Bigfoot Perfect Bigfoot Show family. You are allowed to be dysfunctional, and you have a seat at our table anytime.
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, there's some other really good shows out there that talk a lot about, go more in depth. Like I said, Codex of Curiosities with Rye Voss. The Confessionals talks a lot about that kind of stuff. Tony's a good friend of mine too. The Bigfoot Data and Research, he's out of North Carolina. I can't remember his name. He's got a great show, but there's a lot of great shows out there that talk about this stuff that are in my orbit as well. So check those shows out.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and I'll be hitting you up in a few months to come back, and they'll be waiting on you.
Yes, ma'am. Anytime. Thank y'all very much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.